My name is Renee Aguiar-Lucander. I'm the CEO of Calliditas Therapeutics, and it's my pleasure to take you through a short corporate presentation today. So Calliditas Therapeutics, we're a publicly listed company. So obviously this is our disclaimer page with regards to any kind of forward-looking statements and related to refer you to all the reports and other filings, including risk factors and other relevant information. So Calliditas is a biotech company. We have a commercial product on the market, and we're focused on novel treatments in rare diseases where there's a significant unmet medical need. We have a commercial asset called Tarpeyo in the US and Kinpeygo in Europe. These are the first ever therapies approved to treat a rare autoimmune disease of the kidney called IgA nephropathy. We also have a pipeline consisting of first-in-class NOX inhibitors, and really also focused on rare diseases. The strategy of the company is to continue to build both internally as well as through potentially licensing or acquisitions, a broad-based rare disease company. We are publicly listed both in Europe in terms of Stockholm, Sweden, where we're headquartered, as well as on NASDAQ in the US. And our cash position was around $80 million at the end of Q2. So in terms of the pipeline, this is the pipeline. We're going to talk mainly today about the Nefecon franchise, which is our commercial franchise. As I mentioned, this is actually approved in the US under the brand name of Tarpeyo, in Europe under the brand name of Kinpeygo, and we have partners both in China and Japan. Our pipeline consists of a variety of phase 2 trials. 3 of those are ongoing and will read out in next year. That's primary biliary cholangitis, which is a rare liver disease. We also have a investigator-led trial in pulmonary fibrosis, which is a rare lung disease. And we're also running a proof of concept trial in head and neck cancer. And we're starting a 4th phase 2 trial this year. The target is to start initiating that trial in Q4 of this year. That's in the Alport syndrome, which is another rare kidney disease where today there is nothing approved. But let's start with the Nefecon franchise, which consists of products both in development as well as commercially approved. It's focused on a rare autoimmune disease of the kidney called IgA nephropathy. It's a rare disease, but it's a large orphan indication. And we're estimating that in the US, there are about 130 to 150,000 patients, about 200,000 in Europe. In China, this is actually not a rare disease. It's fairly common, and estimates there is that up to 5 million patients are available in China. There's a genetic predisposition that's required, but it does need a trigger of some kind, and this is not extremely well understood at this point. Patients are generally diagnosed in their 20s and 30s, and we know that more than 50% will continue to progress towards end-stage renal disease, obviously resulting in dialysis or transplantation. This is a disease which actually is not acute. It doesn't have lots of symptoms apart from this continuous decline of the kidney. And the way that you can try and follow it and see that there's a problem is the fact that you're spilling protein into your urine. And that is how a lot of times you will be diagnosed in terms of knowing that you have a kidney disease. And this particular disease, however, doesn't start in the kidney, but actually starts in the gut where you have the vast majority of your immune system. So there's a particular part of your small intestine, kind of the distal part of your small intestine called the ileum. And there we have a concentration of something called Peyer's patches. It's a lymphatic tissue that actually contains B cells, and they produce something called IgA1. These are antibodies that are meant to be there. They have a function. But as this disease is triggered, there is an overproliferation, overproduction, or leakiness of these IgA1 antibodies into your bloodstream. And what happens then is that the body reacts, has an autoimmune reaction, creates large autoimmune complexes, and these are the ones that get trapped in the filtration mechanism of the kidney called the glomeruli. So they do that, they will create an inflammatory response, and that will ultimately lead to fibrosis, necrosis, and a significant reduction in kidney function. So this particular drug is actually therefore designed to target this origin and really be disease modifying by attacking the very beginning of this disease. We've developed a product that's actually particularly formulated to be released therefore in this area very specific area called the ileum, which is, as I said, the distal part of the small intestine. We're using a well-known active ingredient called budesonide. This is a potent topical, so locally acting immunomodulator. It is particularly known to therefore kind of, as we've seen in our clinical trials, modulate these B cell activity. But it also is a drug that actually it clears very quickly, and before it actually gets out into the blood circulation, 90% of it is destroyed in what's called first pass metabolism by the liver. So there is a very limited kind of systemic exposure and therefore also limited systemic side effects. But by having this very, very specific formulation, there's a capsule that's coated. It stays intact as you swallow it through most of your intestine. When it gets to that kind of target area, it releases these beads, which are triple coated with a variety of polymers and also therefore the active ingredient. And that will have this kind of immunomodulatory effect on these B cells and hopefully therefore also, as we've shown in our study, really have a very significant impact on the disease. So we have been pioneering this new treatment in IgA nephropathy for well over a decade. And this is a busy slide, but this actually shows the design of our phase 3 trial, which started already back in 2018. And in 2020, we read out an interim analysis of this trial. And it was on that basis that we applied for accelerated approval in the US and conditional approval in Europe. We called it that because obviously it was using a symptom of the disease, namely proteinuria reduction. So as we're seeing this kind of disease take hold in the kidney, the filtration membranes in this glomeruli kind of get damaged and they start letting through bigger molecules such as proteins. And it's that kind of protein in your urine that tells you that you have a kidney issue. So in reducing proteinuria, that was really the symptom that was the endpoint for the first interim readout. And we successfully showed a very significant reduction in proteinuria in the treatment group. We treated these patients for 9 months daily. And then we actually had a 15-month observation period off drug. This is in order to actually show that this drug, could be and should be disease modifying and have a biological impact that should be sustainable even when patients are off drug. It was a large trial, 364 patients. And what we then finally did, we read out the full trial in March of this year. And so this would the whole 364 patients. Well, in the interim analysis in 2020, it really only looked at 200 patients and the 200 patients treated for 9 months. The full data would already included the observational period and all 364 patients. And as the endpoint, it had the actual filtration kind of capacity of the kidney, which is called eGFR, estimated glomerular filtration rate. And so what we saw in that study was a very significant impact on kidney function. After 9 months of treatment, what we can see is actually that the treatment arm had seen no real deterioration of kidney function, actually a small improvement, 1.2%, whilst the placebo group had seen a significant reduction of the kidney's ability to filtrate blood by about 4.5 milliliter per minute. What we then saw after an additional 15 minutes of observation is that this benefit that was created by the treatment was actually sustainable and durable. And what we could read out from a kind of 2-year analysis is that the actual kind of benefit in terms of milliliters per minute saved was about 3 mils per minute per year. So total amount of about 6 milliliters per minute preserved over that kind of 2-year period, which really only included 9 months of actual treatment. Also in terms of proteinuria, which was the original kind of approvable endpoint for the interim analysis, showed this kind of durable response. At 9 months, proteinuria reduction was around 34% with the treatment. And we actually saw placebo had a very small reduction, but over the full 2 years, that kind of actual benefit was pretty much preserved at 31%, even if there was no treatment over those additional 15 months. And as you can see over the 2-year period, really the placebo group has had no benefit in terms of proteinuria reduction. And again, we know that from a kind of side effect profile, this is a very well-known drug. It's been used in other indications, such as, for example, lung, treating asthma. So again, treating that mucosa locally in the lungs. What we're doing here is obviously treating the mucosa in the gut with a similar kind of effect, but with a completely different formulation. So majority of any kind of adverse events were mild, some moderate, but it really was a very kind of well-tolerated drug. So we believe that this has the potential really to establish a new standard of care in this disease. This targeted immunomodulator, it's designed to really locally target the very beginning of the disease. So it's at top of the disease cascade and really has shown to be disease with a real disease modifying potential. And also what we can say from a patient perspective, this also gives patients an ability to not have to stay on drug for the rest of their life. They can hopefully manage this disease by having an intermittent rather than a chronic treatment, and really by that kind of staying out of dialysis or transplantation, which is the target, obviously, with regards to the effect of this drug. So in terms of our actual commercial activity, so as we said, we actually got the accelerated approval in the US in late 2021, and we started commercialization early 2022. And since launch, we have commercialized the product for around $80 million of sales, $37 million for the full year of 2022, and obviously about $43 million in the first 2 quarters of this year. So in the US, obviously, we're continuing to do, this is really the first time ever that a drug has been approved in this indication. And so this is really kind of the way we are creating this market. We're doing it with education of healthcare providers and engaging them in this discussion, teaching them quite a lot about the actual pathophysiology here, since this is quite unusual. It really is the kind of gut renal kind of axis here that's active. And really kind of talking about the pathophysiology of this disease and how we can really kind of interfere with that disease from the very beginning at the very top of the cascade. We obviously have also worked with market access and obviously also with patient organization. And as you can imagine, when these patients have never had anything approved, nothing that was specifically designed for this disease, this is a very important event, obviously, for all of these patients to finally have something that's been FDA reviewed and actually showed not only to have an impact on proteinuria, which is kind of a symptom, but have such a clear benefit also in terms of the kidney function, which came out of the phase 3 trial, and which had a primary endpoint that it was reached with a statistical significance of 0.0001. In terms of the US, we have a very strong commercial leadership team with a lot of experience of launching rare disease drugs. We now have an awareness among nephrologists of over 90%. And as the drug is being used in clinical practice, we're seeing more success stories from patients, peer-to-peer recommendations are building. We are targeting this market with around 60 sales reps. Their core background really is in rare disease and nephrology. And from a market access perspective, we also now have coverage of well over 90% of the US lives. And obviously on basis of our recent data that was published in August of this year in the Lancet, there is increasing clinical evidence available for the practicing physicians and a growing number being able to kind of benefit from the treatment of Tarpeyo. As I mentioned, we have partnerships ex-US. STADA is our partner in Europe. We have Everest Medicines, who is our partner in China. And at the end of last year, we also signed a partnership with Viatris in Japan in order to actually take this drug through development and commercialization also in those areas. I mentioned our pipeline is based on our NOx inhibitor program. So these NOxes, they're enzymes. They're dedicated to doing one thing. They're producing reactive oxygen species called ROS. This is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. We need this in our bodies for cell signaling. But if we get too much of it in the wrong place, it can actually lead to fibrosis. And so what we want to try and do here is obviously have a NOx1,4 is actually our lead agent, is important kind of targets for therapeutic inflammation and fibrosis. And what we are doing with this, as I mentioned, is we have several kind of clinical programs underway. One I mentioned obviously is in head and neck cancer. We've done a lot of work on a preclinical basis with this platform in head and neck. So as a proof of concept, we wanted to take this into the clinic and show that we can have a similar kind of effect in the clinic as we've seen preclinically and in animal models. And this kind of proof of concept study looks at patients really which have relapsed or metastatic head and neck cancer. And in those type of cancers, there tend to be a high level of cancer-associated fibroblasts. And so this is really looking at about a 50-patient study where we're taking standard of care, pembrolizumab, together with either setanaxib or placebo to see if setanaxib really can have this effect of basically reversing this kind of heightened kind of state of fibrosis and actually therefore allow this pembrolizumab to work in terms of immunotherapy. And we had a very supportive interim readout in July out of 16 patients that we looked at. So obviously this is pretty much half and half kind of placebo active. 7 out of those patients showed progression-free survival, and 6 of those were in the active treatment arm. And we're expecting the final phase 2 data to read out in the first half of next year. We're also having a trial in PBC, primary biliary cholangitis, the rare liver disease. That will read out around middle kind of 2024. And on this we have a fast track designation from the FDA, and we'll take this data in order to decide how we take this forward in a pivotal trial. We also have an investigator-led study in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, a rare lung disease, and data from that will be expected in the second half of 2024. And as I also mentioned, our target is to initiate a study in Alport syndrome, which is a rare kidney disease, which will also be a phase 2 trial, also be placebo-controlled, which we hope to initiate in Q4 of this year. So we're very excited about our journey ahead, not only this year, but obviously also the next year. We filed for full approval of Tarpeyo in IgA nephropathy. We've been granted priority review, and the PDUFA goal date is December 20th of this year. As I also we'll file for full approval also with EMA and MHRA. That decision we would expect to have in the second half of next year. And the regulatory decision in China is expected in the second half of this year. And based on the supportive interim biomarker readout in July, we're looking forward to the full data in the first half of 2024, as well as the other kind of indications which we'll read out, and the initiation of another kind of kidney disease, where again, there's nothing approved today, and we would obviously love to be able to continue our development and be able to provide these patients also with an actual approved product and actually really pioneer a real solution for those patients where today they don't have anything approved. So with that, thank you very much for listening.